Hi, everyone. Seth Abramovitch here from The Hollywood Reporter.
And Chip Pope of the Pope family. What that?
The one Pope.
The one Pope. The young Pope, now the new Pope.
Yeah, we'll call you the new Pope. So welcome back. And this week's guest is who I consider Mr. Showbiz, Nathan Lane.
Yeah. I didn't get to be here for the recording of it. I was in Texas over the winter break doing some stand-up. But listening back to this, I wish I would have been there because it was such a fun interview.
Oh my God. We had so much fun together, me and Nathan. And Chip is going to listen along with you, all of you, and give his impressions. I consider him to be one of the most talented, hilarious, sort of iconic performers of his generation. Although I don't even know what his generation is. He's so timeless. I feel like he could have been a huge star in like the talking
20s,
in the silent era,
yeah, that's
in the
true.
20s and the 30s and the 50s. He just has this timeless nature to him. And it was a real treat to have him here. And we'll get more into it right after the theme song on
It Happened in Hollywood.
Chip.
That's me.
What do you think of Nathan Lane?
What, besides how you mentioned he's transgenerational?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool right off the bat. I really like Nathan Lane a lot. Saw him in The Producers with Martin Short.
Oh, wow.
It was fantastic back at, this is probably like 2002 maybe, or 3 at the Pantages.
Oh, okay, here in LA, but live on stage.
Yeah, and it was a lot of fun. They were a great team.
Yeah, he always really impressed me. I think I first took notice of him when he was the lead Nathan Detroit in
Guys
and Dolls on Broadway, and he got a Tony for that.
Oh, wow.
In fact, his real name is not Nathan. He took the name Nathan from the character Nathan Detroit.
Whoa. It seems like he's secreted a lot of his life, in a way, as you'll find out.
Yeah, it's actually Joseph Lane.
Joe Lane.
He is like Broadway legend. It's all kind of just like mixed together. But he has a few iconic roles. One, you already mentioned, The Producers, and the one we're going to talk about today.
Modern Family. Oh,
no.
But he is on that.
He is on that. But no. We're going to do The Birdcage.
Yes, The Birdcage.
Which is Mike Nichols' adaptation from 1996 of La Cage aux Folles, the French movie farce. Which, before becoming the Americanized version with Nathan Lane and Robin Williams as the gay couple at the center of it, became a Broadway musical called La Cage aux Folles.
Right.
But I think ever since he saw the original, Mike Nichols wanted to make his version of this movie, and this was his realization of that.
And a reunion with Elaine May, his old comedy and improv partner.
They had a falling out,
60s.
and this was their big collaboration, and it was a huge hit for both of them. So a fun one to delve into. But since I had Nathan here, I had a feeling he had a really interesting sort of origin story. So we're going to go a little bit backwards. We're not going to go right into the movie. I'd like for you to hear Nathan talk about what his childhood was like growing up in Jersey City, right across the river from Manhattan.
As a kid, I was given a lot of books by my oldest brother, Dan, who eventually became a teacher. And because my father died when I was 11, so I think he felt he had to fulfill that role in some way. And both he and an uncle of mine would give me books as a young child. So I was a voracious reader, and I was sort of fascinated by the Algonquin Round Table, that group of sort of witty writers and journalists who would gather at the Algonquin Hotel and drink and make witty remarks. And they were all desperately depressed or tragic in some way, and yet they lived this, well, at least from that perspective, a glamorous life in New York City. So New York City seemed very far away and exotic to me. And reading about, it was my brother, my oldest brother, Dan, who also got me interested in the theater. He took me to the theater. He actually volunteered my services as an actor as a kid in a college play that his friends were putting on. So I don't quite know why he decided that I would be involved in the theater. It may have been because, when I was around 10 or 11, both brothers, I have another brother, another older brother, a middle brother, Bob, and they took me out to throw a football around. And then after about 10 minutes, I called them over and I said, listen, I am not a sportsman. I said, 10 or 11. So perhaps he thought, well, if he's not a sportsman, perhaps he wants to go into show business. So, yes, it all seemed very glamorous, and I would watch the Tony Awards, and that seemed very, very glamorous, and I was very enamored of all those actors, Robert Preston and Zero Mostel, and so I started reading plays as well. I joined a play of the month club, in fact, called the Fireside Theater. The first play they sent me was The Odd Couple by Neil Simon. And it was very exciting getting that. I remember looking at these black and white Martha Swope photographs of Art Carney and Walter Matthau, and reading it and reading it in a geography class. I stuck the play inside a book and was reading The Odd Couple and burst out laughing. And Sister Liam Neeson grabbed me and said, "What's so funny?" And I said, it's the international date line is imaginary. She beat me senseless. But certainly that was an influence on me. Neil Simon, Eugene O'Neill, I just read a lot of plays and about the history of the theater. And then eventually I was doing plays in school. And, as far as, my home life went, it was difficult. My father was an alcoholic who drank himself to death when I was 11. And my mother, not long after he died, she was going through what was then described as manic depression, but now we would call bipolar. But it wasn't diagnosed as such for several years, and she was in and out of mental hospitals, and I had to grow up very fast. So I'm sure it was also an escape. I was very interested in comedy as well, and they used to show on television old Laurel and Hardy films, or Abbott and Costello, or Jackie Gleason and the Honeymooners. I loved Gleason as a kid. And I was sort of a student of all that. I wanted to read about all, the old silent comedians, and I wanted to know all about it. I'm sure it was an escape, and comedy was certainly it was used as a defense mechanism. I was a chubby little kid, and before anyone would make fun of me, I would make fun of myself, and sort of classic defense mechanisms.
Did you do that, Seth? Did you make fun of yourself, or what was your defense mechanism?
No, I made fun of other people.
See, so did I, as a young, prepubescent gay child. Really?
And we still make fun of each other all the time on this show. We're working our
we're working it out.
Our stuff
but
out.
But it was like authority figures and stuff like that. It wasn't like
it was
other kids.
It was the teachers. That's who I used to, I think, make lives miserable.
Yeah, so it's sweet when, the ones when you hear people making fun of themselves first before somebody else can get to it. You hear about that. And,
yeah, just to hear it from Nathan, he had the classic upbringing of, that there was a lot of pain there, a lot of sadness, and sounds like he also didn't fit in, and so he turns to comedy and drama and fantasy to sort of find some happiness there. And
right.
His family was Irish Catholic.
Right.
Chip.
Even though, I really thought he was Jewish.
Yeah. He has,
I don't know, maybe because he does like Jewish, he has that sense of humor. That's
the Borscht Belt delivery.
Right.
But,
and has done so many things in Jewish parts. So I guess, Max Bialystock seems Jewish to me. Maybe it's just Mel Brooks makes everything seem Jewish.
He's honorary Jew.
Yeah.
Okay, so Nathan is enamored with theater, and he starts getting involved in smaller productions and theater companies, doing some stand-up. He finds a partner, and they have a little, like, Nichols and May-esque comedy routine. And
I thought that was wild that they're, like, opening for Eddie Rabbit and Air Supply. That's so crazy to think of Nathan Lane doing that.
And one recurring theme you'll see in his story is that a lot of the people that he aspired to or just was a huge fan of, he ended up collaborating with. So, he had that Neil Simon play that he hid in his book at Catholic school. Well, he later ended up being in that play on Broadway.
Yes.
And Elaine May, he wanted to be like Elaine May and Mike Nichols. Well, he just happens to star in this show. So there is this, how did you put it, Chip?
Secreted it.
He secreted
like
himself.
The secret.
Right. He made it happen for himself.
It's funny. I tried to write that down one time and it just says secreted. So you got to be like secret dash ed, like he secreted it, because it's in print. It doesn't work.
He secreted himself into the lives of these legends. But one interesting stop on the way to fame, he got a good shot at a TV show with Dana Carvey, of all people. And the story he tells about this, I just thought was amazing. We got to let you hear this one.
I got an audition and I got a job doing a situation comedy for NBC with Mickey Rooney and Dana Carvey called One of the Boys, which, we did like 13 episodes and not a very good show. It was a strange experience. I mean, Dana was, brilliant, but he had some sort of deal with NBC, so he was attached to this thing. And originally, it was a show that was written for Jack Albertson, but he died. So they got Mickey Rooney, who was riding high again because of the Black Stallion and Sugar Babies, and he was in New York doing Sugar Babies, and thought in his spare time he was going to milk this for all it was worth. He would do a sitcom. During the day. Well, he was doing 8 shows a week. Remarkable. And
but this shot here?
We shot in New York.
Oh, okay.
That's what got me back to New York.
Oh, okay.
I had been living here for about a year and then went back to New York to do this sitcom. We did 13 episodes.
So that's probably your big break, would be the sitcom, no? With Mickey Rooney and Dana Carvey.
You would think, but no. It really wasn't. It wasn't very good. It wasn't, and it was just a fascinating thing to be a part of, because you had new show business, Dana Carvey, and you had old show business, Mickey Rooney. And he, I just remember Mickey didn't understand Dana. He didn't get it. He liked me because I seemed old school comedy, and Dana was something he couldn't quite pinpoint.
Did he tell you good stories about Judy or?
He was, just you could see what the emotional scars of having to grow up in the studio system at MGM, and having been, he would always tell you he was the biggest star in the world, and then it all went away. So he was an immensely talented person, and when he put his mind to it, he was a really good actor. And when you see him as a kid in some of these things with movies with Spencer Tracy, Boys Town, or the musicals with Judy Garland, he was unbelievably talented. But he was, at that point, he was reveling, I think, in this renaissance, but also there was a tremendous amount of bitterness. Even though he had, used to tell us that, he had found God, he was sort of a born-again Christian. But he was angry. He was a very angry guy. And, and he had reason to be. He went through a long time of, wandering in the wilderness of show business, and, nobody wanted him anymore. And I think there was a lot of drinking and a lot of, dinner theater that he had put behind him. This story I tell is, there's a story, there are many Mickey Rooney stories. We'd do 90 minutes on Mickey Rooney, but I don't think you want that. But we had to film a little 15-minute pilot, a presentation for the network to decide if we all had chemistry and it was all going to work. This sad little premise. Dana played a college student who rescued his grandfather from a nursing home and brought him to live with him and his college roommate in a little apartment off campus, and hijinks ensued. So
you're the roommate?
I was the cranky roommate, the uptight roommate. And so it was terrible. It was a terrible show. Anyhow, we were waiting to shoot this little pilot in front of a studio audience, and we were sitting in a little green room with Mickey, and he was very quiet, and then he turned to us and he said, "Let me tell you something, kids. This is going to be the most successful show in the history of television." And so Dana and I were looking like, you got to be kidding. This thing we'll be lucky if we last 13 episodes. The greatest success in the history of television. He said, and we're going to be rich. We're going to make a lot of money. I mean, a lot of money. We're going to be so wealthy. And then on our hiatuses, we'll do a stage version of the TV show, and we'll make even more money for that. And he says, because let me tell you something, and he's getting louder and angrier. He says, Ike and Tina Turner made $8 zillion last year, and Judy Garland died a pauper. And so by now we're, backed against a wall, frightened, and there's a knock on the door. They say, we'll be ready in 5 minutes, fellas. He said, okay, thanks very much. He was just sort of getting warmed up for the show. But he was a complicated fellow.
Wow.
A complicated man.
Okay, now this is why you want Nathan Lane on your podcast. For these Mickey Rooney stories. Mickey, his head's spinning off, thinking about all the money that he hasn't yet earned.
Yeah, I mean, it's like he's just been sitting around for like 30 years waiting for his comeback. Here's what's going to happen.
He's going to milk every second of it. Well, I think it was a bit of a cautionary tale for Nathan at that point, who was just on the verge of stardom, what he didn't want to end up being, even though he had so admired this guy. Okay, so, he paid his dues. That show was not the launching pad he thought it would be, but he paid his dues doing off-Broadway and then finally working himself up to Broadway. And his big breakthrough part was in this Neil Simon play, Laughter on the 23rd Floor, which was sort of inspired by Simon's experience as a writer on Your Show of Shows with Sid Caesar.
Right, with all those great writers that were on there. Mel Brooks.
Yeah, I mean, it
Carl
had
Reiner, Larry Gelbart.
Every classic golden age of TV comedy writer on that thing. And it was just, the biggest show on TV. I guess Saturday Night Live would be a comparison, but it was bigger than that. But anyway, he ended up getting the part of the Sid Caesar part, which was totally casting against types. Sid Caesar was 6'2" and 250 pounds, and Nathan is a lot smaller than that. But he was so talented. His talent was such a huge force that they kind of reconceived the part and gave it to him.
Wow.
And so he was the star of this thing. He was the star of the show within the show, and he was the star of the show. And one night, someone very important came to see it with his very famous wife.
Kanye and Kim?
No, not Kanye and Kim.
Oh.
I was doing this play, and Mike Nichols came to see it. I had been doing a film during the day, and I sort of got there a little late. I didn't go on until a half an hour or so into the play, and I actually, I sort of looked out in the audience, and I saw Mike Nichols and Diane Sawyer in the audience. And I had met him briefly once before, introduced by someone, and he was like a godlike figure, and I knew he had seen me in other theater things, but then I was very surprised he came back afterwards. He'd never done that, and he was very gracious and said, "I'd like to talk to you about a film," and so I said, "Sure." And so I called him the next day, and he said, I want to do this remake of La Cage aux Folles, and Elaine May would write the screenplay, and Robin Williams would play opposite you. And I said, well, which part are we talking about? Is this the drag queen? And he said, yes. And I said, oh, well, that's a very good part. He said, yes, that is a very good part. And so that's how it began. It's a long, complicated story, because initially they were going to make this film with Steve Martin playing the Armand character, and Robin was going to play the character that I eventually played. And then Steve couldn't do it, couldn't get out of it. He had another commitment, couldn't get out of. And then Robin decided he had been in drag and Mrs. Doubtfire and would prefer to play the more restrained role and not get in a dress. And then that part opened up, and somehow he thought of me. But I had, do you know the history of La Cage aux Folles? It was a play.
It was a play that
in
became
Paris.
a French film.
It was these two guys, and interestingly, a comedy team, Jean Poiret and Michel Serrault. And they were a very successful comedy team who did television. And then Jean Poiret wrote this farce, this French farce. And they did it on stage for like 1,800 performances, and then made this film. And something I was reading was, I find this really interesting. When they made the film, and Poiret just co-wrote the screenplay with Francis Weber, and I don't know, the producer, but I think it was Francis Weber who included these two rather key scenes in the movie. Because when I saw the movie in the late 70s in New York, it was I thought it was just so subversive what they had done, because it was just, it looks like a French farce, but, you know, the gay people were the heroes and the straight people were the villains. And I thought this was, you know, it was just, and it was also hilarious. But they added these two scenes in it that I thought were crucial, which one was the scene I think it's at a train station or a bus stop, and the Birdcage is at a bus stop, I think, where he's going to go off to the cemetery to die, and he stops him and follows him and sits down with him and says, I can't. I'll have to be buried there too, because I can't live without you. And then there's another scene where when he comes out in a plain suit and says, I just want to help, you know, and he tries to be, I'll wear this dark suit, and he's still wearing pink socks.
Right.
And it's the exact same scene in the original French film. And apparently Michel Serrault, who was so brilliant in the original, who I stole anything I could from him, because he had played it, you know, for years on stage, and he was slightly miffed about this had been strictly a farce, and was a little annoyed by having to humanize this flamboyant character. And yet they're two of his greatest scenes, and it also just adds so much.
Indeed, and watching the Birdcage, I hadn't seen the Birdcage in probably like 20 years. That's the thing about those scenes that do make the film a little deeper. Because I recently rewatched the film, and that scene that's at a bus stop, I was wondering, boy, I bet this is like right halfway into the movie. And sure enough, it is. You know, time-wise, it's like 60 minutes into a 2-hour movie. It's the classic midpoint of a movie. The tone of it is a little bit different than everything else, and it really deepens the movie. But it illustrates what Mike Nichols was so great about, and Elaine May, in comedies that they do. They would play it for laughs, but it would always be grounded in a real reality. So it never got too out of control to where it seemed unbelievable. You know, they just have a good sense of walking that line between the farce and keeping it real, that you still believe in the characters.
Yeah, and, you know, to his credit, he left both those scenes in pretty much exactly as they were in the original film, because he knew how well they work.
Yeah.
You do get very invested in their very real relationship, and that's what makes the movie work. Just moving along, so he gets offered the part, but he had committed to be in another big Broadway production of A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum, which was to be produced by Scott Rudin, who's produced many films and Broadway shows, and he thought he couldn't get out of it, so he turned the part down.
Wow.
But Mike Nichols was determined to have him, and he finally just said, Mike, why don't you go talk to Scott Rudin? You're kind of a big deal, and I'm not quite a big deal yet. And he did, and they agreed to do the show a year later, which helped the show. It did really well on Broadway, because at that point he was now a movie star because of the Birdcage.
Wow.
So all's well that ends well. But he did have hesitations, because this was a very openly gay, unapologetic drag queen part. And Nathan was out, I think from the age of 21, he was out to his family. But as a professional actor, he wasn't. And the idea of now being a movie star, internationally recognized movie star who's out, you know, made him a little jittery.
You know, I had been in movies, but only in small supporting roles. So... yeah, I mean, I did think, oh, well, I'm going to be in a dress, but it's such a great part. And you're working with, you know, legendary, you know, Nichols and May, to me, were, you know, they just, as a team, that was one thing. So the notion of them having this reunion, you know, she had helped him out. They had been estranged for a long time. And then she had helped him out on this movie, Wolf, which wasn't going so well. It was an unhappy experience. And so they kind of really totally reunited on this. They had always wanted to do this. They loved the plot, one of the great comedy plots of all time. And I think Mike, frankly, he wanted a big, fat commercial hit. And he had, at one point, you know, there was the musical, the Jerry Herman musical had been very successful. And at one point he tried to do, there was a version of La Cage aux Folles that they were going to do, that Mike was going to direct, which was a totally different, I think it was, I want to say it was Maury Yeston wrote a score. It was set in New Orleans, and it was called The Queen of Basin Street. And and then that didn't work out. And then Jerry Herman did it, and it was a huge success. So this had always sort of been on his radar. And so to work with them, Elaine May is just one of the most extraordinary talents ever, and Robin, who was, so incredibly generous and such one of the sweetest and most sensitive souls, and just a perfect collaborator and partner. And I'm very, very lucky to have had that. And everybody, it was when, Mike always used to say, Nathan, I only want nice people on this movie. I would say, okay, that seems like a good idea. Nice people are good. That's helpful.
Okay, so I guess not everyone knows what Nichols and May is. So for our uninitiated, Chip, our resident comedy librarian,
wow,
can you give a quick rundown on Nichols and May?
Pretty much. Now, Nichols and May in the early 60s were the toast of Broadway. They did improvisations, which was new and interesting, exciting, the Chicago idea. And they would turn these improvisations into stage shows. So they would come up with the sketches a lot of times in improvisation and then turn them into full-on two-person sketches. And so they did a lot of these sketches on TV shows, on like Jack Parr's show and stuff like that, where they would just go and do like a 7-minute sketch. And it was that kind of humor. It was very revolutionary at the time because it was character-based. It was not as broad as
very dry
TV comedy had been. So it was more in that kind of like Bob Newhart, kind of cerebral, low-key.
Yeah, there was some amazing,
very
very subtle humor happening in the early 60s.
Mike Nichols and Elaine May.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Welcome to Long Dust. Can I help you?
Yes, I read your ad. I'm interested in the $65 funeral.
Was that for yourself?
No.
For another? May I ask, where did you catch that ad?
TV Guide.
And then they had a falling out. I'm not sure if he went off to direct movies after the falling out. That's got to be that way, right?
Well, Nathan knows about the falling out, so we'll let him tell a little bit more about that. But first, he's going to talk about his first time meeting Elaine May, who was just this giant, towering figure in his life until that moment. And this is their meeting.
I was holding this screenplay in my hands because I read it and thought it was great. And she just looked at me with sort of mock exasperation and said, I did the best I could. I said, well, I think you did better than that. I think it's great. And, it was wonderful to see them together, Mike and Elaine, and how protective he was of her. And not that she needed protection, but, she's a brilliant woman. But it was great seeing them together. I remember we had a dinner once where I had brought my Nichols and May record and asked them to sign it.
Yeah, I think people forget that they had a falling out.
Yes, it had. I mean, I think they would talk maybe on the phone. They had such a bond, and it was the way they exploded when they first came to New York after Chicago and took Broadway by storm, and the records and TV appearances and changed kind of the face of comedy. They were so original, but. Yes, they had done a play. She'd written a play that he starred in, and then it was a disaster. And then he had a clause where he could get out of it or something, and it was that sort of led to the falling out. Mm. Eventually, she did that play again, and then renamed it. It was called Taller Than a Dwarf, and I think Matthew Broderick started it. And it didn't go well that time either.
It's poison.
But it was not a as brilliant as she was, this thing didn't work. But so yeah, they had a bit of a falling out, and and I think they both had to find their ways. He would have happily gone on as part of the comedy team, and she didn't want to do the same thing over and over. She wanted to explore and improvise, and he liked polishing it and presenting it. And what's so bad? And they're loving it. And so, but it's sort of the breakup that also led to him directing and having this tremendous career as a director, and her own directing and writing.
So they broke up in 1961, which is crazy because they had just started getting really popular in 1960.
Wow.
And then
that's like, compare that to a rock band. That's like
it's like if the Beatles broke up in 1962.
Okay.
But anyway, he wanted to direct shows, and he went off to be a director. And of course, he turned his directing Broadway shows into movies. With Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, his first movie, The Graduate, Catch-22, Carnal Knowledge,
Angels in America on
Silkwood,
HBO.
Angels in America, which is fantastic. He's one of the best directors that this country ever
with
produced.
Natalie Portman.
Closer, great movie, underrated movie. But he is, not from this country, but yet he's one of the top American directors of all time. But anyway, they broke up until The Birdcage, which is 61, 35 years later. That's kind of crazy that they didn't work together for 35 years.
Yep. And
Nathan Lane brought them back together.
So they're filming The Birdcage now in Miami and I think on sets in Hollywood. And quick rundown on this plot. It's basically they run a cross-dressing drag club, like RuPaul's Drag Race to our younger listeners. And the husband is the owner. He's the more masculine of the two. It's kind of old-fashioned takes on gay couples where one is the man and one is the woman. So they're married. They have a long, beautiful relationship. The drag queen half of the couple, who is sort of the MC star of this drag review, very dramatic and, taken to fainting couches and very diva kind of behavior. And then
a type that does exist in reality.
Are you trying to ruin me?
Don't look at me. I'm hideous, fat and hideous. Oh, I hate my life. Oh, there is a packed house out there. That's all I am to you, isn't it? A meal ticket. Can't stand. Never mind about my feelings. Never mind about my suffering. It's just about your show. Not even our show, your show. Well, I want a palimony agreement, and I want one now.
Well, I don't have a palimony agreement on me right now. Is tomorrow all right?
Don't use that tone to me.
What tone?
That sarcastic, contemptuous tone that means you know everything because you're a man and I know nothing because I'm a woman.
You're not a woman.
Oh, you bastard.
The husband is, trying to keep everything going at the club, and they're very popular and they have a beautiful life. And they have a son, the
Robin Williams character.
The Robin Williams character has a son from a previous little affair with
Christine Baranski,
who's
I don't remember their names either.
A very maternal person who happened to give birth to this son. The son reappears. He has a fiance, and he's asking the parents. The fiance's parents are very conservative. He's asking, "Can we tone it down? Maybe even pretend like you're straight."
Yes.
And it leads to this big comedy of manners, farcical dinner scene where the drag queen character comes out in drag and they think it's a woman, and hijinks and hilarity ensues.
Armand is much more sophisticated than I am, but then he comes from such good stock. Just like these two adorable youngsters. Don't you agree?
Where's the bathroom?
What?
I'll show you.
Oh, no, that's okay, that's okay. I'd like Mother Coleman to show me.
Oh, my dear child.
Kiss.
Armand, I'm only going to the bathroom.
Well, I'll go.
Oh, well, I think you're all crazy. My man.
Isn't this wonderful?
Oh.
All of us together, all of us.
We're all going
This
to
is
the
so moving. I think I'm going to cry.
But as we mentioned before, the real heart of the movie is the relationship of these two guys who really love each other. And when it came out in the 70s in the French version, and even in the 90s in this version, there was something kind of quietly radical about seeing two men love each other on screen.
Yes.
Now, if you've been listening this season, you know we did the Making Love episode with Harry Hamlin, and the world was not ready for a gay, serious drama dealing with, not poking fun and laughing at the idea of gay. But Birdcage was a farce, and so it did kind of play well in the Midwest. People it was very easy for them to laugh at these ridiculous characters and their dresses and their fainting fits and all that. It kind of fit, what people thought of as gay stereotypes. And that, rubs some gay people the wrong way. But one interesting case study is actually one of the characters in it who was played by Hank Azaria. Why don't we first let Nathan explain a little bit about how Hank got cast in the part of the houseboy in this movie?
Hank Azaria, initially it was based on the original play and film. It was supposed to be an African American as the maid. And then suddenly when they had the read-through, everyone got a little uncomfortable with that. Even though it was, he was just this big screaming queen and it was supposed to be funny. There was something about it that made people uncomfortable. And Hank was doing like a number of different roles. Mike was a fan of his he had done the Robert Redford film about a quiz show, and he loved him in that. And so he had him read several different parts, and one of them was the stage manager at the nightclub. And for that, because he's so brilliant at dialects and voices, and he talked in that accent, with that what became known as the Guatemalan accent. And everything he said was funny. So they said, I don't think this is working so well, but the notion of we're in South Beach, and they have this Guatemalan servant, maid, whatever you want to call him. So that's how he wound up playing Agador Spartacus. Agador Spartacus. Anyway, and he was Hank was just brilliant. Everything. Every single thing he said to me was hilarious, hilariously funny. He also got himself all buffed up. I don't think he's ever been so buff because he had to run around in those little tiny jean shorts and tank tops. And he was great, just great. And that was certainly a movie that kind of really helped put him on the map.
She worked hard for the money, so hard for the money. She worked hard for the money, so you better treat me right. That's right.
So what did you think of the Agador Spartacus character?
You know what? It's very broad, I guess. I remember the first time I saw it, I thought, that guy's hot. I mean, that was the extent of my cultural appraisal of it, which is, I'm not proud of that. But I guess viewed under today's light, Hank Azaria, he's gotten in a little hot water for just playing other ethnicities that he's not.
And sexual persuasions in this case. But yeah, he's obviously very talented, very funny, is really great at voices and accents. He does tons of them on The Simpsons. But yeah, in recent years, his Apu character on The Simpsons has come up under heat for being both a racial stereotype and inappropriate for a white person to be doing. And they're, I understand, phasing the character out.
Right.
This is similarly, he's playing a very flaming gay airhead Guatemalan houseboy.
Right.
And I don't know if it would really work anymore. It wasn't quite as hilarious to me as I think the first time I'd seen it.
No, there'd be like an uproar. For good reason, because say you are a gay Guatemalan watching something, watching this, you'd be like, wait, what?
Yeah,
Where's that guy from? New Jersey or something?
Yeah.
Where is Hank Azaria from?
And what's so funny about being a flaming Guatemalan? I mean, I don't find it funny, but we're in the identity politics era now where we're making fun of someone's ethnicity and or sexuality is not kosher. But in the 90s, it was still okay.
Or you could be a Guatemalan and you think it's hilarious. I mean, this is the thing about life.
That's true.
Like we always go, well, what about that? But, the person that it is supposed to be portraying might go, I love that. I think that's my favorite thing. So this is why times are always so confusing.
Personally, I thought Hank Azaria's was amusing, but a little bit grating after a while. I preferred Nathan Lane's performance. But part of that is because Nathan Lane is maybe authentically a gay man.
Yes.
But he wasn't out at the time of the movie coming out, and he actually didn't come out till 1999 officially. Wow. And he was very open about talking about his thinking as to why he came out at that time and how he came out. And here's him on the subject of coming out as a celebrity.
You know, I came out when I was 21 to my mother and to my family. Everyone knew. Mm-hmm. And certainly everyone in New York knew. But yes, this notion of coming out publicly as if I was a public figure, because I didn't feel like a public figure, but no one had really been that interested in my sex life up until then. And then this film happened, and I was faced with, suddenly I had a publicist, and they had to say, well, what do you want to do? You're going to walk into a room filled with journalists, and this is going to come up. And I just said, I don't know if I'm ready to have, to start discussing this. And I don't know whether I want to be, that this is, I finally get a nice role in a movie, and I want it to be about the acting and not a coming out story. And right or wrong, that was my decision. But, especially at that time, it's okay now for people, or especially straight people, to say, I don't want to discuss my personal life. But then you might as well have said, and by the way, I like cock. So it was useless. It was a useless thing. Then I was asked, people forget this, then I was asked by Us Magazine, are you gay? And I said, I'm 40, single, and I work a lot in the musical theater. You do the math. What do you need, flashcards? I thought I had come out, but apparently I didn't. That wasn't enough. So then finally I said, okay, we'll do the advocate interview. And then people were just annoyed that I came out. Yeah, we already knew. Fuck you.
You can't win.
Yeah. So there was no winning there. Now, in retrospect, yes, I should have. I just should have gone with it. But it was all so intimidating, and I was terrified. And it was not, people accused me of, he's going back into the closet, which I certainly wasn't, or that, what does he think he's going to become a leading man in movies? And it wasn't that at all. I was just, the notion of going into a room full of strangers and discussing all this was just terrifying to me. I went on the Oprah with Robin, and we had to discuss this beforehand. I said, I'm not ready to discuss whether I'm gay or not with Oprah. I'm just not. I can't. I can barely deal with meeting Oprah, let alone telling her I'm gay. And if you ever see this thing, it's she says to me something like, "Oh, you're so good at that girly stuff," whatever it was, and Robin, you obviously sensed that she might be going towards the sexuality question, and he immediately swoops in and diverts the interview away from that to protect me.
Which is so sweet.
Yes.
But was it like when you realized that you had the role, were you looking forward to the trip every day?
Absolutely. Every day I ask Mike Nichols, I still have this role, don't I?
Really?
And it was extraordinary to work with people that, first starting with Mike Nichols, who was sort of this legendary
Were you afraid
director.
of taking that role and being like typecast and people forever saying, are you not? Is he, honey? I don't know.
Girl, you changed just in the middle of that sentence. I don't know. I'm telling you. Don't make me come out there. What was that? I love all of a sudden.
Yeah. So?
What was the question? All right. Quite honestly, I wasn't ready for any of it. And it's funny. There's the only sort of uncomfortable moment in the making of it was the use of the word fag in the movie, and it was sort of I said something about Alexander the Great was a fag or something like that. I said it. I think Robin said it once. And I couldn't figure out why Mike and Elaine wouldn't let go of this. Because I said to Mike, not to Elaine, but I said, as the only gay person in the scene, I feel a little uncomfortable saying this, and I don't know why the character would be using that term. And I don't know whether it was because it was from the original play or screenplay, or whether it was came up in a generation where fag was a viable punchline. I don't know. But as I said, I felt lucky just to be invited to the party. So it was very hard for me to question him at all. And this was a very sensitive thing. And he said we tried many different versions of the line, and then he did the classic. He just said, "Just do one for me," in the original line. And of course, that's what he used. And I was naive. I was just like, "It's Mike Nichols. What am I? I'm just lucky to be here." And then of course, if it's shown on television, they have to bleep it now.
Right.
And then the movie had come out, and I was sitting in a cab in traffic in Manhattan, and there's a guy in a truck, and I was just starting next to me, and I was just starting to deal with, I've seen people are recognizing me. This has not happened before. Occasionally, people recognize you from the theater in New York. That had happened, but the fame thing was beginning to happen, and there was a man in a truck, and he looked at me, and he smiled, and he started pointing at me, and he started to scream, "Hey, faggot." He just kept saying faggot, like several times. And I was like humiliated. And I thought, I wish Mike was here for this. And it was sort of the other side of fame.
Oh, that sounds horrific.
Yeah, it was awful.
Was it happening a lot, or?
No, but I'll always remember that after the movie has come out and it's successful, and this guy, and you thought he was smiling and was just going to wave or say something nice, and he kept saying faggot, "Hey, faggot."
God.
Well, yeah.
That just pisses me off, you know? It's like he makes it big. He's like a movie star, and he has to endure this kind of just demeaning, disgusting behavior from just some jackass in a truck. Screw you, whoever you are.
Right. Well, maybe they were covering up for something, and they learned the error of their ways later, because people evolve. But it's a harsh word. It's a harsh word, even if you've earned the right to use the word. That's the problem.
Yeah, and it's interesting that
F-word.
he was the only one objecting to using it in the script. And it's funny, I pulled up the Hollywood Reporter review of the Birdcage, and the word makes an appearance there. Although in his element and having no trouble making his portrayal of a, quote, middle-aged fag Arnold into a memorable screen character, headliner Robin Williams is relatively subdued as the calm and responsible nightclub owner, half of a gay couple. So it's kind of like the movie is giving the media the right to use it, and it just kind of perpetuates itself. Like, oh yeah, that's okay to say that if he said it. I mean,
right, and that's one thing that straight people don't always understand. As good as their intentions are, that when there's always a thing with like, well, why can't I say that? Right. You can say that.
But I also made the point to Nathan that it did a lot of good for to open people's eyes to gay relationships, and like he was mentioning before, the scene in front of the boat at the bus stop was a very touching scene that I think moved people and made them see same-sex couples as legitimate as opposite-sex couples.
Yes, and it's also coded when you have Robin Williams doing it too, because you go, well, he's not gay. There's certain things that whether they work on an unconscious level or a conscious level.
But as that review actually does point out, this is a good segue, Robin Williams did play against type in this movie, and he played the more sedate straight man to Nathan's, over-the-top screaming drag queen.
Right.
Which was a change of pace for him, because you knew what was inside that he was not letting out.
Right. And there were still a few Robin Williams type moments that people expect.
Yeah, actually, Nathan tells a great story about working with Mike Nichols, and probably the most famous single moment in the movie almost didn't make it because Mike Nichols didn't think it was in character. But we'll let Nathan tell the story.
When Mike was one of those people who, as a director, it was like you entered into a love affair with him. He loved the actors. He was so supportive, and he literally would sit in the video village watching, and they'd have to put a blanket over him because he would be laughing so hard at scenes to keep it quiet. And he was a formidable intellect and wit, and you know, there was also the part of him that made you a little nervous. This was when we did the scene where I'm singing the song, we're rehearsing the song that Robin has written that actually Steve Sondheim wrote, and I'm singing to this sort of beautiful guy, one of the dancers, and he's chewing gum, and I'm upset by it, and so. We were supposed to do this in a full, there was going to be a set, and I was going to be in a full drag, some interesting costume by Ann Roth, and that very morning, Mike suddenly said, "This is all wrong," and he threw it all out. So people were scrambling to come up with a costume, and so they put me in sort of flash dance rehearsal togs, right. And that's where we were going to do the only real sort of we rehearsed it like a play. And so there were, Robin had come up with this, you do an eclectic celebration of the dance, this famous moment where he runs through different choreographers.
Right. Michael Kidd.
Yeah, Michael Kidd. Martha Graham. Madonna. But there was no ending to it. Mm-hmm. He just had this list of choreographers. And then he was just going to walk away from it. And then that morning, Mike said he was, whatever mood this was, which made him throw everything out and start from scratch. Maybe it was his improv background. He needed to do that. He seemed to be toying with the idea of cutting that little improv, that it was out of character for Robbins, for Armand. And so because it didn't have an ending. And we stood there, and it was very tense, and we all were kind of trying to come up with something, a line, a joke. And then I finally said to Mike, you know, a director once said to me, "I love what you're doing, but keep it all inside." And he said, "Yes, say that, Robin." So that's how we answered with, "Yeah, but you keep it all inside."
So you saved that bit, which is an iconic bit. That's amazing. Was it hard for Robin to not do his crazy improv stuff?
We had a dinner after it was all over, and he said it was very hard for him to watch me carry on in that way, and to have to be the more restrained character. But I thought it brought out wonderful things in him as an actor, and he was very moving and very, And he was incredible.
What about me? What do I do? Do I just stand here like an object?
No. You do an eclectic celebration of the dance. You do fussy. You do Martha Graham. Or Twyla. Or Michael Kidd. Or Madonna. But you keep it all inside.
Very underrated, up to that point as a dramatic actor, because you look at something like World According to Garp. He's fantastic in that and so grounded, and but the flashier part was John Lithgow, got the award in that one, and so it would take audiences a while to accept Robin Williams as a serious actor. And then the next movie after Birdcage was Seth.
Good Will Hunting?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Which he won an Academy Award for. So,
but he had done Good Morning Vietnam, which was kind of dramatic.
That's true. Definitely, like the last part of Good Morning Vietnam is very dramatic.
He always, walked that line where he could be just absolutely ridiculous and hysterical, but also just make you cry at the drop of a hat. Oh, we miss you, Robin. Nathan obviously had a very close relationship with him working on this film, and that feels very warmly towards him. And he talked about their relationship after the film, and also what he didn't realize was going to be their last time ever seeing each other. Was shortly before Robin's death on a lot while they were both filming their respective TV shows. So here's Nathan talking about Robin Williams. Did you stay in touch with Robin after the film?
Yes, a little bit. Yeah. Yes, we would, talk from time to time, and he was always lovely. And yeah, I can't say that we became close friends. It was certainly a lovely working relationship, and he couldn't have been kinder to me. Certainly he could have asked for anyway. He could have said, we're going to make this big gay movie. I need another movie star opposite me, and he didn't. And I don't think he was that familiar with me. It was really Mike's recommendation that I play this part, and he, And then after the first read through, he was he was always incredibly supportive of me, and he was a very special person. But no, we didn't keep in touch in that way. From time to time, we talk on the phone. But I had seen the last time I saw him. Actually, I was doing. I did an episode of Modern Family, and he was on the lot doing this. He did a sitcom for CBS. Brad Garrett was in it, and I dropped by and I saw him, and we chatted briefly. He was in the middle of filming, so we couldn't really talk, but we just, said hi, and there had been talk. There was always talk about doing a sequel. Someone was always suggesting this, and it never happened. Because the original French film had two sequels. The second one isn't so good. I mean, the premises are kind of funny. The second one is literally like a spy thing. They get involved in a spy ring or something, and then they put a piece of microfilm in his in his dress, or I don't know what it is. It's crazy, but there is some very amusing set pieces in it. And the two of them, Ugo Tognazzi, Italian actor, a star, and Michel Serrault again, are hilarious in it. And then the third one is, the premise is so good, but the film isn't so great. That he has to marry a woman in order to inherit all this money, and they have the reading of the will, and they say that he just faints on the floor. So there was talk of doing a sequel, but it never materialized, and there was always some rights thing, and then around that time there was talk about trying to do, because of Netflix had started, and there was a talk of doing, could we do like a series about using those characters and revisiting it now that they're older, and the kids have grown up, and they have grandchildren, and it's and gay marriage. It was the notion of, could we do a movie about gay marriage with these two guys who have been together so long, and then it leads to them finally getting married. But then it never happened because of Robin's passing. So,
do you remember what you talked about on the lot that day? Did you discuss those projects, or?
Oh, I was just happy to see him, and that I was. It seemed like the show was going very well. It had debuted to very good ratings, and I was just congratulating him. And it was not, he was literally in the middle of filming. They were like shooting scenes, and so he couldn't talk for long. We just, while in a little break, we chatted, and so.
And could you ever know that it'd be the last time you ever saw him?
Yeah. Well, and just the whole, this what he was going through, this Lewy body dementia, and I think Bobcat Goldthwait, who is his best friend, and has talked about it. What people I don't think realized that he was going through this. It had sort of Parkinson's-like symptoms, but that his brain was sort of disintegrating, and he was going through all this and knowing where it was headed, and you just hate thinking about that. I mean, it's hard to even talk about him in the past tense. He was someone who was so alive and brilliant. I mean, this extraordinary mind and his incredible. His soul is he's such a sensitive, and almost too sensitive for this world. I can remember when there was a number that we filmed for the Birdcage, another Sondheim song. I sang a song called "Can That Boy Foxtrot," and the day I filmed it, we did the whole thing with an audience, and he had the day off, but he came in that day, because he said he wanted to be there for me. For moral support, and so he was backstage, listening, and he would be very encouraging, and he was a great human being, and one of the greatest talents who ever lived.
Sad.
Yeah, it's very sad that he's not here anymore. I can't believe it, but he has left a tremendous legacy. I mean, of great work, brilliantly funny and wonderful acting. And
that's a great loss. But you know, it was really touching to hear how he showed up to see his song get shot, even though he wasn't needed that day. I mean, that kind of is a great example of the kind of person he was.
Yeah, nobody does that.
But Robin Williams did it. Those are the kinds of stories that you can only get from these people that were there. That, you know,
it's amazing.
Getting a little misty-eyed. But so the movie came out. It was a big hit. I think it was like #1 for like 5 weeks or something. It made $170 million.
It's crazy. In today's money or 1996 money, that's definitely even
96 money.
Wow, that's real impressive.
So someone pull out the inflation calculator. And, it was a big one. And obviously, you know, teed him up perfectly to become a major movie star. Everything was in place, right? I mean, he totally killed it in his review for the Hollywood Reporter. They said Nathan Lane is a triumph in the plum role of Albert.
And just because up to that point he had not had any big leading roles in movies, and there he is just holding his own with Gene Hackman, Diane Weist.
Yeah.
But Robin Williams, of course.
It wasn't to be, at least it's not according to him. It didn't turn out quite as he expected when it came to Nathan Lane's movie career.
It didn't really lead to, a kind of film career that I thought I might have afterwards, just because it got so much attention. And I remember that afterwards, I mean, look, I've had a great career, and it's still going very well. But there was a notion of, perhaps this will lead to more film stuff, and I did films, but it didn't really take off in that way.
Do you think that was homophobia?
I'm sure a little bit. I'm sure it was a little bit of that. I was asked I was offered the 2 films after the Birdcage. And because everyone sort of assumed that, you must be getting tons of offers. You're just sitting at home on a chaise, going through scripts, eating bonbons. And so, no, I got 2 offers. One was a film called Mouse Hunt, which I eventually made.
Gore Verbinski's first film with the wonderful Lee Evans and Chris Walken. Which is a great film.
It's fun. It's a cult children's movie. Bizarre. He made like a Coen Brothers movie for children. And I was offered Mr. Magoo.
Okay.
And so I was supposed to meet with this director, and they said, and I said, well, what are they going to, would I be, would you shave my head, and would I be squinting? And he's a little old man, it's all I remember is the cartoon character,
right.
Jim Backus. By George, that bumping into things
thinking things are other
because
things.
He was so. That's right, nearsighted.
I would have loved to see
all of that. And I said, so it's that? That's what you would have me do? You'd be putting like a lot of prosthetics and me bumping into furniture. And they kept saying, no. And no, he's not nearsighted. It's a whole new Mr. Magoo. And I said, that's all Mr. Magoo is. He's an old man who's bald and nearsighted, and he talks like this, like Jim Backus. And so I said, that doesn't make any sense to me at all. There's no character if you take all of that away. Then what is he? Then he's just called Mr. Magoo? But that doesn't make any sense. But they offered me, there was a ton of money. It was the most money I'd ever been offered to make a movie. Yeah. So there was a part of me that was like, maybe I could make this work. For that amount of money, I could make it work.
Mr. has 20/20 vision.
Anyway, but he has 20/20 vision and hair. God. Anyway, so I opted to do the only other option was Mouse Hunt. And because he seemed like a really interesting guy, Gore Verbinski, very smart and talented, and but at that point, there's only his big claim to fame was he directed the Budweiser Frogs commercials. So I didn't know what it would be, and and when they explained it to me, it's 2 guys, in a house trying to kill a mouse for 2 hours. And I was like, really? These are the choices. Mr. Magoo, who's not really Mr. Magoo, who can really see, and two guys chasing a Tom and Jerry cartoon. I don't know. But, yeah, but I did it. I did Mouse Hunt. And then, I was with an agent at the time who, and I went and I said to him, he's now deceased. I said, not much has happened after the Birdcage was, I thought, maybe going to lead to stuff. And he said to me, maybe if you weren't so open about your sexuality. And and I said, really? And, he was gay. He was an older gay man.
Was he your agent or an agent?
He was my agent, yeah. And his name was Jeff Hunter. He was, he was this shaved head, mustache, old queen. And he said, well, maybe if you weren't so open about your sexuality, you might have gotten more offers. I was like, well, gee, thanks a lot. And I left. I went to CAA. That was a mistake. Where fun goes to die. Anyway, that's what happened after the Birdcage.
Okay. I needed that laugh after the Robin Williams thing.
Yeah.
And he delivered. Oh my God. He is
So
funny.
great.
CAA, where fun goes to die. Nathan Lane.
Oh my God.
But yeah, it's still like a lot of pain under there. Like his trusted agent who's supposed to like guide his career and be his right-hand man and also is gay. You were too open.
You know what?
He didn't want to come out. They forced him out. Oprah forced him out.
Maybe if you weren't so open about your sexuality. That's the problem, Nathan. Okay. Gotta go to Palm Springs. Toodles. Have fun with
Manicure
that.
time. You know Hollywood is like this. You imagine, you hear, but to hear it from the horse's mouth, like
Right.
Nathan Lane sitting here telling us, yeah, that's what they told me. I don't know. It's pretty mind blowing to me.
Yeah, and it's like you said, you couldn't win because even at that time, remember when they were trying to make Rupert Everett into like a handsome leading man, and like that didn't work out, and he was like as non-threatening as you could get, and still be like he's a hunky movie star.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, well. Well, Nathan went back to the theater where he felt comfortable, and Broadway embraced him big time. And he's done amazing work there. And he's also done some great work on the big screen and small screen. You mentioned Modern Family. He's had recurring role on that. And he has something exciting coming up.
Oh, yeah, he gave you a pretty juicy bit, right?
Well, two things. Well, the reason he was even available to do this podcast is he's been in LA shooting a new show, which I am so excited about. Legitimately, it's the Penny Dreadful. If you remember the Showtime show that was sort of mixed together all the Victorian monsters.
Right.
Well, they're
right.
going in a super different direction with a spin-off series. Let him talk about it. It really sounds right up my alley.
This is set in L.A. in 1938, and it's and loosely based on some real historical things that were going on. The Nazi infiltration of Los Angeles at the time, which my character is investigating, as well as there's a central sort of murder that has to be solved. But there's a wonderful young actor named Daniel Zavato, who I'm partners with on the LAPD. I partner with him. He's the first Latino detective on the LAPD, and no one will partner with him, and I do. And so it's a lot about his family, and there are many different worlds going on in the show. And, it's about the persecution of the Latino community, and there are many parallels to what things that are going on right now. But it's a fantastic yarn that John Logan has created, and with how these stories intersect, and the world of the Pachucos, so that whole era, of the Zoot Suiters and the rise of the American Bund and all these, and then sort of Nazi organizations in L.A.
This is all stuff that's catnip for me. I love all this LA history and
as
noir
well as this sort of Chinatown noir murder mystery in the center of it that we're trying to solve. This very wealthy family has been murdered and left in the LA River in this kind of ritualistic murder. They're covered with the paint of the Santa Muerte, it's a sort of gruesome murder, and so they're trying to solve that as well, and it all leads to many, many different things.
Wow, I can't wait. Sounds
yeah,
great.
yeah, me too. It's been going well, and it's really, really well written.
And anything else on Broadway coming up?
Well, I'm not. Yeah. Yes, I'm scheduled, and if all the dates work out, because now this show is, I've been told we're probably doing a second season of the show, and
Terrific.
So. But in spring of 2021, I'm supposed to be doing Death of a Salesman on Broadway with Laurie Metcalf, and Joe Mantello is going to direct.
Whoa.
And,
has that been announced?
Scott Rudin is producing. No, it has not been announced.
Oh, my God.
But it's been in the works for a very long time. And
you heard it here first.
So, it was something we've been working on for a long time.
Oh, my God. That's like Lear and Willie Loman. There's a few parts every actor wants to play.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's certainly one of the greats of the 20th century. And, I really look forward to that.
Oh, my God. I'm going to have to see that. You heard it here first. Spring 2021.
On Broadway.
Nathan Lane playing Willie Loman, Death of a Salesman. And before that, he's going to be in Showtime's Penny Dreadful, City of Angels. So definitely check that out. Nathan, thank you. You are one of my heroes. So just to spend this time with you was a very important and exciting moment in my life. And you were awesome. And I'm sorry that guy in the truck was screaming epithets at you. You don't deserve that. You deserve every accolade.
Yeah.
All right, well, another amazing episode in season 2.
Yes, great job, Seth.
Well, my pleasure. Everyone, don't forget that if you like us, you can give us, good reviews on iTunes. We can always use them. And if you don't, please don't. But you probably wouldn't have listened this long if you really hated us.
Keep it to yourself in this new climate where everybody just thinks they got to rattle on about everything.
Yeah.
Please.
And we love hearing from you. And we set up this wonderful email address, ihih@thr.com. And that's about it, right?
Yeah.
Until next week, where we're going to have someone equally amazing. It's Andrew Stanton.
Wow, Andrew Stanton?
From Pixar.
He hardly ever does interviews.
Yeah, this is a super rare interview, and he's going to do WALL-E.
And I just acted like I didn't know that we had interviewed him. Andrew Stanton? It's like,
every time
I know that we interviewed him.
Every time I hear his name, I'm like, what? We got Andrew Stanton? I forget.
It really is surreal. I was like, whoa, yeah, we got that guy?
But yeah, we got Andrew Stanton. And until next week, we'll see you in Hollywood.